Today, we're talking about something we hear from families all the time. I haven't told my kids yet. Maybe you've just received a diagnosis, or maybe treatment has already started. Maybe you're still trying to process the news yourself and you simply can't imagine saying words like cancer, serious illness, or even dying out loud to your child. As parents, our instinct is often to protect our children from things that scare us the most. But what happens when protecting them from the words actually leaves them trying to make sense of what's happening on their own? Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is simply spit it out. Welcome to Wondercast, a community collaborative podcast supporting families navigating the complexities of chronic illness or injury. Wondercast is supported by the generous sponsorship of Texas Oncology. Texas Oncology, more breakthroughs, more victories, experts in cancer care. In today's episode, I'm joined by Kacie Stehling, a certified child life specialist with Wonders and Worries, who also helps support families through our national support line. Together, we'll talk about why honest, age-appropriate conversation matters, why children may understand even when we think they don't, and what can happen when kids are left to fill in the blanks themselves. So, if you've been wondering, how in the world do I tell my child? This episode is for you. This is Kacie.
I'm Kacie. I've been a child life specialist for 13 years now, and I am a mom to two sweet and silly boys, and I've been married to my husband for 11 years. And my favorite part of being a child life specialist is that I get to help families during some of their darkest days and help them to see how resilient they are. I joined Wonders and Worries about 1.5 years ago. Well, longer than that now, actually. I joined in January of last year, so just over 1.5 years ago, and it's been wonderful. Before that, I was a child life specialist at Texas Children's and the emergency room for a long time.
Well, we're so glad to have you here. And I kind of want to take a minute to connect about the topic we're talking about today. I think it carries a lot of weight in the conversations that we have as clinicians, but also in other roles that we're doing. So I would love it if you want to take a quick minute to share about the work you're doing with the support line and kind of what that tool is for our listeners.
So the support line is one of the resources that Wonders and Worries offers for any family across the nation. You don't have to be receiving direct support yet in order to utilize the support line. And professionals can also call the support line on behalf of a family or to get more information. But when you call the support line, what happens is a certified child life specialist answers the phone, and they can provide emotional support to families. They can also coach parents through what to say. So a lot of times families will call when they just got their diagnosis and they don't know what to say to their kids. So we can coach them through it. We can rehearse scripts with them on what to say. And then we can also email resources and recommended books to them. And it's a free resource that we provide Monday through Thursday for families all across the nation.
And it's growing. So many wonderful referrals come through our support line from both hearing about us out in the world and then also through their clinicians or maybe their school counselor. And if they call outside of our answering, there is a recording service that can help answer.
And we always call back.
Yes, always. One of the things that we talked about that we've seen coming through a lot of conversations with families that we're connecting with, or maybe on the support line, or even when I'm out across the country visiting with people in conferences, is I haven't told my kids yet. And sometimes they are days into treatment, and sometimes it's weeks, and occasionally it's even months. I think that it's important for us to talk about why we think it is so difficult for parents to say those words out loud.
Yes, it is really hard to spit it out. Nearly all of the parents that have told me that they haven't told their kids yet, they've told me that if they say the words, then it means that it's actually happening, which is totally valid. And a lot of parents have also told me that they're trying to protect their children's innocence by not sharing the news with them and protect their childhood. But I like to encourage parents to shift the focus from instead of protecting their child's innocence from the inevitable, to protect their relationship with their child by building and maintaining that trust.
You're replacing what you feel like they don't know with honest connection. And I think that is such an incredible tool to give families. I love how you word it that way. As a clinician, we know that there are so many times that kids, they know more than adults realize. We see this in every session we've ever had. And parents, I know, often worry about talking about illness will make it worse. What do you want to touch on the research and just kind of our experience as child life specialists and how that factors into what actually happens to kids when they're given honest, age-appropriate information about their parents' illness or injury?
Yeah. So there's a ton of research that's been done, and it says that when kids understand what is happening and they have accurate expectations about what they'll experience, then there's a decrease in post traumatic stress, lower levels of fear and anxiety, and better long term coping. So when a child is able to understand what's currently happening and what they can expect to happen, then they're able to move from being in a state of reaction to a state of mastery. And that allows them to cope and adjust well throughout a parent's illness. And some parents have also said that they're worried that their child will get too much information if they share their diagnosis with them. Giving them some information doesn't mean that you have to give them all of the details about what's going on with a diagnosis or treatment. Just try to keep it simple. And if a child is curious, then trust them to ask more questions if they want to know more details.
Do you find that when parents have these conversations that it is a one and done conversation, or do you find that it's more often something that continues to kind of come up or they keep asking questions like at a different time?
Once the initial news comes out, it's very important to keep having a conversation over time, because sometimes the initial conversation, parents have told me that it was shorter than they thought that it was going to be. A lot of parents tell me that they're worried about how their child will react before they have the conversation. And then once they say it, some kids do become tearful, but others are like, all right, cool, what's for dinner? And so it's important, though, to continue to have a conversation and give information gradually and to have some repetition for kids so that they can process that information over time. You know, some families that I've worked with have told me that they have like a Sunday family dinner time where they share updates and continue to have conversations. And some of our in-person sessions and virtual sessions that we have with kids, we provide a wonders and worries jar where they can write down their questions or worries that they have. And then at a family meeting, they can address those questions and worries together. And then some parents also have children's books that we suggest, and they'll continue to read those with their children as a way to continue having conversations about their diagnosis.
Yeah, so many tools. And I think that there's no one perfect tool. And I feel like that's something I've learned in my time of working specifically at Wonders and Worries is we have all these tools available. And if you call the support line, there is somebody who's going to help talk you through what we have found success with. But you will find the right tool for your family. More than anything, I think if you have the openness to conversation, then you're going to have no problem finding a tool because you have already done the hard part of saying, I want to talk about this. We're going to spit it out. We're going to have this conversation. That is already setting the stage for success. And then it will be about how do I identify the right tool to improve communication with my family?
Yes. And when families call the support line and we email them resources, and I tell the families that I email that I'm going to be sending them what looks like a lot of information. And the reason that we do that is because there really are so many resources available that we can send to them, but they know their family better than I do. So they can piece through the information and say, this bit will help my family, this resource, not so much, and just leave it there.
I kind of want to touch back onto the part of the conversation where we were talking about that kids usually know more than adults realize.
Yes.
And I feel like In our clinical practice, I'm sure both you and I over the years have many examples of how we saw that play out either in individual sessions or even back to our pediatric hospital environments where just parents are whisper talking in the hall and you come in and the kids are like, yeah, I've got cancer. I mean, it's just there are so many things that whether they just say it out loud or their behaviors or actions are kind of pointing to, that kids are just so perceptive to the adults around them, especially their most favorite adults, which is their parents. I would love it if you have any examples, maybe obviously with no identifying details, of a
Right.
family that maybe you've worked with where a child seemed anxious or struggling before the conversation, but then really began to flourish after they finally understood what was happening. Like what you as a clinician noticed changed for that child?
Yeah. So I have one family that comes to mind. There was a child that I worked with, and he found out about his mom's cancer diagnosis at recess at school. So what happened was the mom told her friend about her diagnosis, and then her friend told her family. And she didn't know that she hadn't told her children yet. And so the son of that family saw this kid at the playground at recess and came up to him and said, "Hey, your mom has cancer and she's going to die."
Oh my
And
gosh.
he just was shocked. And he was like, "What are you talking about?" As soon as he got in the car after school, he asked his mom, like, "What is going on?" And she had told them originally that she had the flu. There was also a teenager in the family, and she had overheard conversations. I guess her parents thought that she wasn't listening, didn't look like she was listening, but she really was. And so she went straight to Google and started Googling everything that was going on. So they both found out in very not ideal circumstances. I think any parent and clinician would agree that that's not very ideal. And so we had to do a lot of backtracking because we didn't want mom to look like a liar to them. And so what we did was say, remember back when she had the flu? Well, she had the flu and she went to the doctor a lot. And then when she was at the doctor, they found out that she has cancer. And then we shared the kind of cancer that she has and that it was curable. It took them a while to be able to fully trust her again with what she was saying, but their mood and their affect about her diagnosis, it changed almost immediately. So the child went from being very scared and fearful and thinking that his mom was going to die really soon to feeling very relieved. I mean, she was sick, but she was going to be okay. And the teenager went from feeling upset and anxious and angry that her mom hadn't told her to still feeling a little cautious around her, but eventually their relationship, I think, really flourished once the truth came out about everything. And the teenager became one of the most helpful people in taking care of her mom as she went through chemo.
I think across all developmental levels, kids in their own way, they want to be helpers. And it looks
Yes.
different as a preschooler versus a middle schooler versus a high schooler. But if you can help your child find a role in your illness, it actually makes them stronger and it makes
Yes.
them feel like they matter and they feel seen. I will never forget that I had a kiddo that came into one of my sessions. We were doing our second session, which is our illness education session, where we really talk through what our wonders and our worries are about their parents' illness. And they knew, obviously, with wonders and worries, by the time we get to that point, we always want parents to have shared that they are sick or injured
Yes.
because we don't want to tell lies to children and we don't want to be the person who's not their safe person sharing things that maybe the parent themselves have not shared. So really, we want to come at this from a family approach. But in this session, I guess when the parents did share about it, they never said the word cancer. They just kept saying the C word. So in our session, it was with a 7-year-old, and I'll never forget because we were sitting in the session and we have our whiteboard and we're talking about what wonders we have about cancer or about mom's illness and what worries we have. And he was like, all I need to know is what is the C word? And I was like, what do you mean? What is the C word? He was like, what does it mean? There are so many words that start with C. And he had been making a list in his room of all the words that started with C to see if he could figure it out. Here, the parents really were trying to be helpful and they were trying to have the important conversations, but they weren't coming at it from a childlike mind. And the word cancer to them was terrifying. But to a child, it's just another word. And so
Yes.
they never wanted to say cancer around him. And so instead, they called it the C word. And he had no idea what the C word was. And so on his own, he's trying to do this investigative sleuthing and like spending so much energy trying to crack the code when the easier solution would just be to call it by its name, to say it, to take that power away, and to just give the words to explain it. And that's where we really hope to, as clinicians, partner with families to help guide you how to do that. We know it's overwhelming, but what's overwhelming to the parent is not what's overwhelming to the kiddo. And so we definitely want to help support that.
That's absolutely true. And it's really important to use those words, those big scary words like cancer or whatever the diagnosis or injury is, to put the right name with it. Because if you tell a child like, "Oh, I'm sick." Well, do you have a cold? Like, do you have a stomach bug? What's going on?
Can I catch it?
Yeah,
I mean, there are
it
so
might be
many other scary,
contagious.
there's so many other scary things that can come. Yes.
Yes. So it's very important to give kids the right language to describe what's going on and to inform them that it's not contagious and they can't catch it and they didn't do anything to cause it too is also really important because some kids think that they got in trouble and that caused the cancer to happen, which is not true at all. So,
It's so nice to hear also, I think, the part that parents we really prep them for, right, is the conversation or how to do this or how to talk to your children about any illness or difficult conversation. But
yeah.
what I don't think is talked about enough is what comes from that for these kids. You might have this kid that is just tummy aches, not sleeping at night, maybe regressed a little bit and is bedwetting or, waking up in the night or not doing well in school or falling asleep at school. And once you have that conversation for some of these kids, like you said, it's a switch. It's like right then and there, it's like a light comes on. And they're like, great, I have this question, this question, this question. And they feel safe enough to ask it. And so,
Yes.
are they ever going to stop worrying about their parent? Well, no, just like that parent would never stop worrying about their child. But their worry now has the trust that they're going to be brought into the conversation and they're going to be a part of the plans. And I think that goes across the entire spectrum of disease and of injury. We've had so many families where maybe a disease has progressed and that conversation has not happened yet with their family. I remember being in a session with a middle schooler, and she told me that she knew her mom's cancer was back, and she knew it because everybody started bringing dinners again. And she said that everyone brought dinners when mom had cancer the first time, and then we had no dinners, and now dinners are coming again. So I know that the cancer is back. And again, it just goes back to that reality, right? That these kids are just so intuitive to their routines and to the people's interactions outside of the family. And so whenever there's that shift in that dynamic or that shift in that routine, that's going to send a flag like, hey, something's up. We don't give kids enough credit
We
for how
don't.
perceptive they are.
Yeah, a lot of parents just assume that their child doesn't know, or they assume that their child already knows, or that they wouldn't understand. And those are not fair assumptions for these kids. A lot of these kids, when there's gaps in the information about what they know, they fill in those gaps with their imagination with things that are not true or things that are even scarier than they are in real life. It's so important to have truthful and honest conversations and open up the communication with them so that way those gaps are filled with true and accurate information.
Keep a quote here on my on my desk actually, and I'm sad I don't have who to attribute it to, but it's one that I heard somewhere years ago. But it says worry is the misuse of imagination. And I've loved that because worry actually comes from a strength. It comes from having an imagination. It's just when your imagination is set free and it's
It
not
just gets the
given,
best of you.
it gets the best of you and it's not given the correct information to help harness that imagination into a place that is supportive. And so it takes us into a place of worry and of concern. And that even helps me as an adult to think like, no, I need to find the answers so that then I'm not spending precious energy that I could be doing something else worrying. I can be doing it to find solutions or to ask for help or to take a break, things like that, that really are better uses of my energy and of my time. So if you're a parent listening today and you're like, okay, I got it. I've got to talk to my kids. I have to have this difficult conversation. I see the value in it. I hear what you're saying, but they say, I have no idea what to say. How would you coach them? Could we kind of walk through what like a simple conversation or even model some language that maybe
Yeah.
they could borrow, kind of give them some scripting?
Yes. Well, first, okay, so with any script, I like to set the scene. So, first, make sure you have some time to digest all the information that has been given to you before you share it. Because if it's a life altering illness or injury that is happening, you need a minute to process it for yourself. I also suggest recruiting a partner or another family member to be there with you because sometimes when you're spinning it out, the words just kind of get stuck. And so it's good to have another adult there with you to help support you with that conversation. I also like to have a cup of water when sharing information because it can just buy you time to take a sip of water. If a child asks a question when you're sharing the news, just take a sip of water, gives you time to think about it, and then you can answer the question. And it's also important to think ahead of time about which children you're going to share the news with. If you have more than one child, are you going to share it all at one time with everybody, or are you going to tell them separately? And a lot of that depends on how old they are and their personalities. So, like if you have a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old, it would probably be best to tell them separately. But if you have a 7 and a 10-year-old and their personalities mix pretty well together with sharing information, then you can tell everybody together. For the actual conversation itself, try to keep it simple. Even for older kids who might understand some of the medical language, when someone is really stressed, they are not able to fully function cognitively. And so that's why, like, when you go to the doctor and they give you difficult news, you only hear just a little bit of what was said. And so it's the same with kids. So simplicity is key when having these conversations. So you can start by saying something like, there's something important that I'd like to talk to you about. And then start to share the story. So you could say, my body isn't working like it should. I felt a bump on my breast and went to see the doctor, and they took some pictures, and they also looked at my blood cells, and they found out that I have cancer. And you can explain that cancer, if that's what your diagnosis is, you can explain that it's not like the flu, and it's not like the cold, and it's not contagious, and just address any misconceptions that they have about that. And you can ask them if they've ever heard the word cancer and what they know about it. Then you can start to focus on what's happening right now or what's going to happen very soon. So that might look like saying something like, right now, I feel mostly okay. Next week, I will start taking a medicine called chemotherapy to get rid of the cancer cells, and I might look or feel sicker before I get better. And then you can focus on the changes that your child will experience. So, like, you can say, you're still going to go to school and soccer and swim lessons, but our friends and our neighbors are going to drive you when I can't. And so after you address what's happening right now and what's going to happen in the very near future, then you can start to open up and process everybody's feelings. And you can share how you're feeling about the situation. And you can say that you're feeling sad about hearing this hard news. And a lot of parents have told me that they're worried that they're going to cry in front of their kids when they're sharing difficult news. And that's okay. It's always okay to cry. Crying is a healthy coping method. And I think it's always okay to model healthy coping in front of your kids. So crying is coping, and that's okay. And if the emotions really start to take over the conversation, then it's also okay to pause and just support each other emotionally and come back later and have the conversation again another time. And our support line too, when you're having that conversation, if you get stuck or if they ask you a question that you just don't know what to say, then you can just excuse yourself and call our support line and we can talk you through what to say.
And I think it's okay to say, you know what, that is a wonderful question. I don't really know the answer to that, but I'm going to find out.
Yes. Well, and if that's the case, which often that does happen a lot because kids ask really good questions, then always make sure to actually find out what they're asking and come back with an answer. And sometimes kids ask some scary questions when you're breaking the news. Sometimes they ask, "Are you going to die?" And that is a scary question for parents to answer. It doesn't always need an answer right away. So when kids ask me that question in my sessions with them, is my mom going to die? I always put it right back on. I'm like, well, what do you think? Or if they ask that when you're first breaking the news, then you can say something along the lines of, well, some people do die from this illness, but my doctor is working really hard to get me medicines to make the cancer go away, and they think that I'm going to be okay, or if it's a terminal diagnosis. It's important to answer those questions honestly. A lot of families that I've worked with have said, like, I'm going to have this illness for the rest of my life. I don't know if this illness is what is going to make me die. And so it can be scary to spit those words out though, but it's so important for these kids to be able to hear it so that way they can start to cope. It just reduces so much chances of post-traumatic stress for them as they go through this.
And it really helps them, I think, build that trust up. They might trust you already immensely, but then once they know and they see you being brave, having this
Mhm.
conversation, even if it is an end of life diagnosis, and they hear you say, I'm going to have this maybe the rest of my life, and we don't know how long that will be, that's a great space to then start saying, but as soon as I do know that things have changed,
Yes.
this is what our plan
I'll tell
is.
you.
I'll tell you. And they trust you and they believe you because they know you just told them something very difficult. So when they see you being brave and still telling them, then they know that you'll do it again. And so all it takes is one conversation and the promise of another one, and they're going to believe you because you did it already one time.
Yes.
I don't think it ever gets easier to tell the people you're in charge of protecting and keeping their childhood as pain-free as possible. It never feels good, ever, to give anybody hard news. And it shouldn't, right? Like we don't say, I'm dying and then burst out laughing. There's a reason why that's
Right.
hard news. But if they love you and they want to know what's happening on their own level of understanding so that they can be a part of plan. That's kind of my segue when I'm talking with families is I say we say the hard word or we say the hard news and then we say who are the helpers and what is our plan? And then your plan is going to change 18 million times. We know this, you know this, but your child doesn't need to know this yet. They just need to know that
Oh,
there is a plan and they're a part of it.
yes.
Now, for parents that maybe are their own worst critic and they feel like it has to be one perfect conversation, what do you say to the parents that are worried they're going to say something wrong? Or if they do start this conversation and it does not go as expected, what would you say to support them?
So it's okay to make mistakes. And, kids are human and they know that mistakes happen. So if you say the wrong word, it's okay to say, like, that came out the wrong way. I didn't mean to say that. It's always okay to backtrack. I think when you're having a family meeting and you're sharing difficult news, the kids can see, like you were saying, like the parents are being very brave in this conversation. They can feel that. And so I'm sure that a child isn't going to hold it against them at all if they make a mistake. And I think it's important to give yourself grace when sharing difficult news with anybody. Yeah, you can always backtrack. You can always say, like, oh, do you remember when I said that? Like, that actually I found out isn't the right thing. There's been a change. And, kids are way more resilient than we give them credit for. That's one of the reasons why it's important to continue to have conversations over time, either weekly or with the Wonders and Worries jar or with the reading children's books, to continue to address it over and over again and having that repetition so they can just continually to process that information.
We have these great tools through Wonders and Worries that you can call the support line. We have our website, so there are lots of things, resources. We have a resource library in our website. So we acknowledge that we are not the authority on the right way to do everything. There are lots of other groups and tools out there that we would love to highlight for you as well. So if you're listening and you're like, I don't want to call, I don't want to talk to anyone, I just want to read it, then please go to our website. There are great information. We have a section under resources for parents that says how to have difficult conversations with kids, how to talk to my kids about cancer or about illness or about anticipatory loss or death in English and in Spanish. And so there are some great tools there that you can access on your own, read through it. And if you still have questions, we really do encourage you to call the support line to have those questions answered, and then maybe even see if your child would like to participate in our illness and education coping curriculum. And we can get them started on that either virtually or in person based on where you live. I want to really be mindful of our time. If you could leave every parent listening with just one message about talking to children through serious illness or injury, what would you want them to remember?
So when I was growing up, I watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood a lot, and I'm sure most people are very familiar with him. But one of his famous quotes that I like to remember is, anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about the big and scary things, then they stop being too big and scary to handle. And so I just want parents and families to know that we are here for them. We are happy to help them. And anything that is mentionable is manageable.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast today. Please subscribe and continue to check back as our content is ever evolving. For questions or specific content-related requests, please send an email to podcast@wondersandworries.org.